Your circumstances do not define your future. Your choices actually do.
When I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, it was really kind of a wake up moment for me. I decided then and there that yes, it might be a challenge that I had to live with. It might be something I had to figure out, but you know what? I still had things that I wanted to achieve. In fact, by the time I'd finished all of my studies, between my husband and myself, we had over $100,000 in student debt. And I remember looking at that piece of paper and thinking, I would much rather have the cruise than pay for this thing that just goes out the window. We were able to pay off the last of our $85,000 of student debt in just 18 months. FIRE is an acronym that stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early, because when you have that financial freedom, you're able to gain this level of independence and freedom in your own life so that you can choose to do what you want when you want. There are all sorts of different subtle levels of financial freedom that can really empower you to live life on your terms, whatever that is. Mindset really does play such a large part of it. And that's something that we don't always talk about as openly as I honestly feel like we need to, because there are some mindset traps, but then also some mindset opportunities that can really help enable our success. It's a lot of money, and that is a very quick and easy trap to fall into.
I have a belief that everything adds up, no matter how small, because we're easy to think, oh, it's just $5. Some people just pay stuff and they don't even have budgets.
So easy to live at or even above means. And we hear lots of stories of people doing this. It went into large amounts of debt and had to declare bankruptcy. We are a very consumer-centric culture where we are encouraged left and right to buy this and told you're missing out. And when you're around others that are living this way, it's very hard to be the person that's different and says that, no, I'm going to do this because this is better for me. You have dreams that are worth your time and your attention.
Welcome to Rosabel Unscripted, the podcast where authenticity meets real life stories. I'm your host, Rosabel Unscripted, and in each episode, I dive into unscripted conversations about personal growth, life challenges, and the experiences that shaped us. From heart-to-heart chats with inspiring guests to raw moments of self-discovery, I am here to share stories that connect us all. Whether you're seeking motivation, healing, or simply a dose of real talk, you are in the right place. So get comfortable, tune in, and join me on this journey of transformation, empowerment, and meaningful conversations. This is Rosabel Unscripted. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Rosabel Unscripted, where we pull back the curtain and what it really means to live life on your own terms. I'm your host, Rosabel Unscripted. I'm so glad you're here, and today's conversation is so powerful. A powerful reminder, actually, that your circumstances do not define your future. Your choices actually do. If you are someone who's ever felt like the system was stacked against you and you ever battle like a chronic illness or student debt, just to put a few out there, then this episode is for you. Today, I would like to introduce you to somebody who truly embodies what it really means to live life on your own terms. Her name is Angela Tipton. Welcome, Angela. How are you today?
Doing great, Rosabel. Thanks for having me here.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. I can't wait to unpack all the things we get to talk about. Life. I'm going to let you tell the story. So, Angela, you were diagnosed with Crohn's disease at just 19 years of age, correct?
That's right.
But what I understand is, so instead of letting it take you to the sidelines or flip your life upside down, which I'm pretty sure it was devastating because it's a chronic disease. It's something that it just you day by day. But look at you. You built a thriving career, Fortune 500 biotech, life science company. You pay off your student debt. And you and I, we have something in common, my friend. And that is, I'm at the other side still. I'm somebody who has student debt and want to pay it off.
That's great.
So,
yeah.
It's
not great to have debt, but it's great that you want to pay it off.
And to be honest, I get to be honest in every episode, and this is my time to shine. And one of the reasons I do what I do is because one day I just want to write that one check and be free.
I know that feeling, and it is incredibly liberating when that day comes.
Absolutely. So you learn how to live below your means so you could design that life that feels rich in freedom. I can hear you because it's just in my mind as well. But we're not talking just finances, right? I It's not just finances. Your career just didn't stop in 2017, correct? That's when you launched your first business. What let you tell the story? How about that?
Yeah, let me start with my diagnosis because really that's where I think a lot of, yes, my trials began, but also my journey to success really started is what I feel like. So when I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, it was really kind of a wake up moment for me. On one side, it was reassuring to get the diagnosis because I'd had symptoms for years prior. I'd started having symptoms when I was around the age of 15, 16, somewhere around that. So I knew that something was wrong. I just didn't know what. It took roughly 4 years to get a diagnosis. So having that diagnosis in some ways was liberating. It was helpful to have the answer. But on the other side of that, I also knew it was something that I was going to have to live with and that I was likely to struggle with for years to come. But I decided then and there that yes, it might be a challenge that I had to live with. It might be something I had to figure out. But you know what? I still had things that I wanted to achieve. I wanted to invest in my career, get my education, and do all of those things, right? That many of us want to do. We want to be successful. We want to thrive. We want all of that. So I did that. It's been a long journey, a lot of ups and downs for sure. Struggled with my symptoms at different times where I'd have period flares and I would get periods of remission as well. But throughout that journey, I was able to build up a successful career. I got my bachelor's degree and then eventually I went and got an MBA and acquired a lot of student debt. In fact, by the time I'd finished all of my studies, between my husband and myself, we had over $100,000 in student debt. I think at the time we started actually looking at it and tracking it, I think we were around 130 or so, which was really overwhelming at the time, as you might imagine. And I had this kind of wake up moment where I walked into my accountant's office. We were doing our yearly taxes and I had a piece of paper that told me how much I could write off of my student interest for the year on my taxes. And it's been a number of years since then, but I think it was several $1,000s at the time. And I remember looking at that piece of paper and thinking, I could have bought a cruise vacation with that money instead. I would much rather have the cruise than pay for this thing that just goes out the window. And that was yet another wake up moment for me where I realized that I want to actually do something about this. I don't want to feel this way and I want to get rid of it. And success for us when it came to paying off our student debt didn't happen overnight. We had to put some time and intention behind it. And there were a number of things that we did to pay it off. But when we did that, we were able to pay off the last of our $85,000 of student debt in just 18 months. And it was a lot of effort, required a lot of sacrifices, but it was well worth it in the end. So I know that was a lot, but that's just a brief snapshot of my journey, specifically as it relates to my chronic illness and some of the financial challenges that we faced.
So, Angela, but you built fireyourwaycareer.com. Tell me, what is that about?
Yeah, fireyourcareer.com. It is a website designed to empower people to live life on their terms, which is what I am really passionate about. So on my website, I teach people how to build up their careers in a way where they can gain these increases in their income and then live in such a way, really live below your means so that you can be really intentional about the way you're not only earning your money, but also saving and investing your money and paying off debt as well. So that what that does is that enables you to achieve financial freedom. And that's really where the inspiration for the name of my website comes. FIRE is an acronym that stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. So it's a bit of a plan where it's really sort of a traditional route of achieving financial freedom by really just following a very traditional career, getting successful in your career, gaining increases in your income, and then using that extra income not to fund a more luxurious lifestyle necessarily, but to really get intentional about how you're saving and investing so that you can secure that financial freedom for yourself. Because when you have that financial freedom, you're able to gain this level of independence and freedom in your own life so that you can choose to do what you want when you want. So for instance, if you want to retire early, you can retire early. If you want to explore a different career path, you can do that. If you decide you want to quit your job and start a passion project and see where that takes you, you can do that. It's ultimately about having the freedom of choice to do whatever that means to you. Now, for some people, and then I'm definitely one of those people where it's hard for me to imagine retiring early. I'm very passionate about the things I do in my life and throughout my career. So I don't really see retiring early, or at least not retiring anytime soon. Yet, having been on this path for some time, I have gained a level of freedom where I can take risks that some of my colleagues can't take. I can take a long break. I took, when my kids were younger, they've gotten a little bit older. They're still fairly young, but I took a nice long break after my second son was born to just enjoy time with him and be there with him. And that really gave me so much freedom. And I would not have had that level of freedom if I was having to pay, for instance, a large student loan balance every single month. So there are all sorts of different things you can do. There are all sorts of different subtle levels of financial freedom that can really empower you to live life on your terms, whatever that means.
Right. So let me ask you this. So your background, you talked about you got an MBA. So is your background in finances?
It's
Or
not. No, no. And that's something that I make very clear is I am not an accredited financial advisor. I share tips that have worked for me. However, everyone should take the time to not only educate themselves, but if you need the support, seek out an accredited financial advisor. Now, what I do is I do share tips that have worked for me, but my goals are very specific to me, and the choices I have made are very specific to helping me achieve those. Everyone should make choices that are more aligned with their goals and what they feel will help them get the best outcome that they're seeking. My background, so just to back up a little bit in my career, I actually started my career in the sciences. I got a bachelor's degree in biology, and I actually started working as a research and development technician. I eventually worked my way up to becoming a lab manager, and that was around the time that I was finishing my MBA. And at that point, I decided I wanted to make a pivot into marketing and communications. And I did at that point. And throughout my career, I was able to realize different increases in my income through a few different methods that I used. Some of that was just taking on new jobs and negotiating, but I was also really intentional about my career path and thoughtfully aligning it with not only my skills and my interests, but also opportunities that would allow me to achieve the income that I was looking for.
very good. Thank you for sharing that. One of the questions I have for you is before you came up with the money strategies that help you achieve that goal of paying your student loans and so on, what was that shift in mindset? I mean, what was it that you changed that helped you achieve that?
That is a great question because mindset really does play such a large part of that. And that's something that we don't always talk about as openly as I honestly feel like we need to, because there are some mindset tracks, but then also some mindset opportunities that can really help enable our success. And this is something that I have spent quite a bit of time on myself to understand what is my mindset when it comes to money and finances and career. There were some things that I discovered about myself that were very eye opening. There were some things that I realized that I believed that were helping me, which was great. I leaned into those and focused on building up those where I could. But then there were some things for me that were hindering me and slowing me down and getting in the way of my own progress. One example of that was since I was a child, I've had this inherent belief that in order to make money, you had to work really, really hard. Now, there's a little bit of truth to that. It's not like it's a totally false statement, but in my early career, that mindset helped me build on my career, be successful. I stood out amongst my peers because I was a really hard worker and I did good work. But as I started to build up my career throughout the years, I was starting to get in my own way, and it was starting to cause problems for me to the point where I would work so hard. I wasn't working smart. I was working for the sake of just getting work done. And it wasn't always something that needed to be done or that was the best use of my time. It was because I was feeding into this mindset that I believed I had to work really hard to make money. And it took me a long time to uncover this belief that it wasn't just an overnight aha moment. It took me a while peeling back the layers of my belief system to realize that I had this. But once I was able to identify that belief and understand my mindset as a whole, I was able to actively work on the things that needed some support and some improvement, but then also lean into the things where I was already really strong in. Something that I learned early on as a kid from my dad was the value of saving and investing. And I was able to learn that firsthand from him. One of those things that I learned that I still believe to this day and that I do lean into is that carrying a balance, especially a credit card balance, is very, very risky. Now, I understand that sometimes there's just not a way around it. And sometimes you have to do what you have to do. But when you put the numbers behind what that is costing you, what you're paying in interest, especially for a credit card with the high interest rates they have, it's a lot of money. And that is a very quick and easy trap to fall into. So that is one thing that I was very, very fortunate. And I recognize that I was very fortunate to not have to be in that position where I had acquired a bunch of credit card debt. So I was able to avoid that. Really, the worst debt I had was my student debt. And I know not everyone can say that. So I acknowledge that there was some privilege in that for sure. But when you start to recognize that your mindset feeds into these things, for instance, another one is got to keep up with my neighbor. My neighbor just bought this nice new car. I need to buy a nice new car, right? So what I teach on my website is this mindset of aligning your choices with your goals. Maybe it is a goal for you to have a nice new car. Maybe that means you need to make some sacrifices in other areas. What it's really about is making intentional choices. So you're not just reacting on a gut. You're making intentional choices to cut back in certain areas, and you're making intentional choices to focus and lean in on other areas where it's really important to you. Not everyone wants to live off of beans and rice. I am not a beans and rice kind of person, but some people are willing to do that in order to achieve financial freedom. You have to understand yourself and where you're at, and your mindset can help or hinder you if you don't invest.
Or your beliefs. So, for example, I have a belief that everything adds up, no matter how small, because we're easy to think, oh, it's just $5. Oh,
Right.
cup of coffee. Let me tell you, and I am you have to be intentional. You know, I always if you're trying to save, if you have a goal in mind. So again, those little things, like I'm like, okay, like for example, in this day and age where we have all these streaming services. Now, remember, you used to have just one cable or whatever, I don't know, whatever you call the different company, right? Now you have this little one that does this and this and this. And if you look at it, you know, you pay 5 here, 9 here, 9 here. You just have to, some people don't even, they just pay stuff and they don't even have budgets. So I hear you in a lot of those things. And what a better time, especially for me, and for all of those who are listening right now, to go into this conversation. I can tell you this time, whether it's a month or 2 months, it's been in my mind as well. That's something that's been there. Like, I want to get rid of this debt. Like, once for me, like, if you're not able, at least, because sometimes you can be actively working towards paying a debt, or you could be like, you know, like, yeah, I'll get to that later. But one of the things I do well, since I'm not fully active, like tackling, maybe one of the things I will do is I'll add a little more to the principal. Let's say I'm supposed to pay $400, or the funny part for me is like $427. So I'll make it $450, just to give you an example. That's something that I will do, just to kind of a little bit more to it. And until I can actually, just anything that you can, like, that's just my thinking. Just something super simple and stuff like that. But I want to also ask you, you know, a lot of people are also afraid to live below their means, because not only they associate that sacrifice with lack, you know, and then of course there's the peer pressure more than ever, you know, with the whole social media thing. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree. And it is one of those things that you have to make a conscious choice, because it's so easy to live at or even above your means. And we hear lots of stories of people doing this and went into large amounts of debt and had to declare bankruptcy. Even if you haven't experienced that yourself, you probably know someone or you know someone that knows someone that has experienced some level of this because it's really common in our society and our culture really does celebrate this. We are a very consumer centric culture where we are encouraged left and right to buy this and told you're missing out if you don't have this or that, or, whatever it is. So it is very easy to buy into that mindset. In fact, it's very hard to move away from that. And that's where your mindset and your intentions really, really matter here. It requires discipline. But the way I like to look at this, at least in my own life, is I look at it as a series of trade-offs. I look at, okay, I could buy this nice new purse. Maybe it's a luxurious, expensive purse I'm buying for $1,500, whatever it is. But that $1,500, if I instead choose to invest that in the S&P 500, for instance, I could realize gains on average of, somewhere 8 to 10% per year, depending on how the market is doing. And that could get me that much closer to achieving my financial freedom goals, enabling me to maybe take an extra vacation with my family or retire a year earlier or pay off my house, whatever it is. Those things are intentional choices that you have to make. And the thing that's so hard about it is that most of us are surrounded by people that are living at or above their means. So our close inner circles are doing this. And when you're around others that are living this way, it's very hard to be the person that's different and says that, no, I'm going to do this because this is better for me. And that's where I help teach people that what really matters is that you're being thoughtful about what your goals are. And I know that this is one area where I actually find a lot of people struggle is sometimes they just don't know. They don't know what they want. Sometimes they do. They have some fuzzy idea of, I'd like to travel the world, or I'd like to buy this nice new home, or whatever it is. But I find too, with the fire community as a whole, there are some people that get to this number and are able to retire early, and then they don't know what to do next. And that can be a really hard reality. It can also be really hard when you're working towards that and you're having to make these sacrifices and you don't know what you're working towards. So one of the things that I encourage really early on in the process is building a vision board. A vision board is just a dream board for what are your hopes and dreams. And it can be anything. At this stage, especially, I encourage people not to filter yourself because anything can go, even if it seems like it's an out there kind of dream or goal and it sounds like it's not achievable. So what? It's your vision board. It doesn't really matter if it's achievable or not. At some point, you just think about that. But when you're starting with your vision board, you just put anything and everything out there. And that vision for the future is the thing that helps keep you motivated to stay on task when it gets harder, because it will. It gets harder to stay motivated when you're having to make those sacrifices. When you see someone going to this luxurious dinner or buying this nice car and you want that too. And I'm not saying that you have to make sacrifices in everything, but what does matter is that you're really intentional about what you're investing in or what you're buying into.
Absolutely.
And what you're willing to cut back.
You know what I tend to think about now? You mentioned like when we see somebody taking that luxurious dinner, vacation, or whatever. I tend to think, I don't know. I mean, who knows what sacrifices they have to do that? Like my husband and I, we just took a vacation that we probably haven't taken in 10 years. It's interesting because people don't know, but we saved the money to take this vacation. We went through a lot of sacrifice, a lot of working. We probably didn't take a vacation literally in 2 years, and a lot of things that we had to sacrifice in order to do that. So it's not everything is what it seems out there. It's not, things are not what you see. It's, you have to like go deeper and see what happened behind the closed doors, and so, yeah, it's also freedom to know, like, for example, hey, you were able to do that and that's done and over. You don't have to worry about having to, it's something that's already been paid for, it's been taken care of. And what a relief. Those are probably the nicer vacations, not the ones that you actually go ahead and take. And now you got to pay for it, if you know what I mean, right?
Right.
I mean, it happens. Sometimes people just like enjoy now and save later or whatever. And me, I tend to work at the back end, like do a lot of work on the first and then enjoy it. My husband is sometimes a little bit, what are we not doing right now? We're like, well, because maybe we wait a little bit more. We built up a more, and then we have a much nicer one, like a bigger one or something, So it's about that whole reward and the timing of things. But you also
I
model
agree.
2 little boys. Yes, right. And so how do you model this, this financial empowerment and the balance, for them, especially again, this world of so much consumption, with kids?
Yeah, it is. It is. And yeah, you really can start at a young age with modeling certain behaviors. Like, for instance, my boys will get money from birthdays or holidays and things like that. And something that I will encourage them to do is put it in their savings account with the intention that, hey, if you get this to a certain point, you can buy whatever this nice thing is that you've been looking at in the store for a while. Or, we could maybe take a few dollars and we buy something at the dollar store and then we save the rest of it. So I teach them that, we have to make these choices. If you decide that you want to buy a few things at the dollar store, we can do that. It just means you're not going to have as much to put into your savings account to go towards whatever this other nice thing is that you want to get. So that is something that I help teach them, is that, hey, we all have to make our own series of choices, good or bad, guide them, of course, along the way and encourage them to make those choices that I think are going to be better for them. But at the same time, they have to learn that for themselves too. So I think the big thing though is even when they're young, they can learn that there's a series of trade-offs. They may not immediately get it when they're young, but eventually those lessons will start to sink in and they'll start to realize, oh, okay, that does make sense.
Wow. Let me ask you this. If there's someone out there who's listening who feels that they're stuck in a job that they don't like, or not even don't like, that they just lost the love of it because whatever, they're burned out, let's just say that way, what would be a small step that they can take that you would recommend for them to do right now?
Yeah, a small step you can take is, hopefully at this point, you haven't lost hope that your dreams are possible. And I know it's easy to get into that trap, into that mindset. And I've been there too. I remember sitting at a table with colleagues where I just looked around the room and there were a bunch of worn faces where it was obvious that no one really wanted to be there. They were there because they had to show up, but there were a million other things I'm sure that any one of us would have rather have done in that moment. It is easy to get into that trap. And if you're there, if you're facing burnout, I know how exhausting that feels. And I know sometimes how impossible it feels to get out of that situation. But one small step that you can take today is think about your dreams. Remember what those were. Maybe you start your vision board today. That is one very easy step to just remind yourself that you have dreams that are worth your time and your intention. And it may not feel very achievable right now, but it starts with creating that vision for yourself and being honest about what your dreams are. Even if they feel like they're in a far off, distant future, they feel impossible to achieve. They're not. With enough time, intention, dedication, and yes, a little bit of sacrifice too, they are achievable. And if you find yourself in this job that is just not fulfilling you, there is a path forward. It might be hard to find your way out of it. I remember starting my career when I was paying off my student debt. In fact, this is another helpful bit of information to share. When I started paying off my student loans, I was so underpaid at the time that I got my bachelor's degree right during the Great Recession when there pretty much no job prospects. I started working in food service and taking pretty much any odd end job that I could. And I wasn't even able to pay my student loan, my minimum student loan payment. I just didn't have the money for it. By the time I paid for my rent and my food, I had hardly anything left. And I remember feeling really ashamed of myself at the time, but I ended up calling my student loan lender and I asked for a graduated repayment plan because I had no other options at the time. Otherwise, I would have had to declare bankruptcy, but even bankruptcy doesn't get rid of your student debt. So it was a tough situation to be in. And believe me, I did not want to work in the jobs I was working at the time either. It was not a fun situation to be in. And it was hard to imagine a path forward and a way out of it. But I reminded myself that I had dreams and goals that were important. And at the time, yes, they felt impossible, but I knew eventually that my circumstances would change, that eventually I would find a better job that would give me a little bit more income and would get me a little bit closer to achieving the rest of my dreams, like being able to pay off my student loans. And it's a hard place to be in. And I think all of us that have been there have that aha moment at some point of, this is awful. This is miserable. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. But those are also the moments that really empower you to make change. So getting back to that mindset, are you going to accept defeat and say that this is it? This is the rest of my life and forget it. I'm not going to try it. Or are you going to use the situation to empower you to get one step closer, whatever that means? And that one step closer might be applying to a different job, or maybe it's improving your resume or updating your LinkedIn profile, whatever it is. How are you going to get just one step closer? Because even one step, as long as you're moving forward, you're going to eventually get there. Your situation is going to eventually change. The only reason it doesn't change is because you don't decide to take action and take that one step. But just take one step, step by step, and you will eventually get there.
Absolutely. Another question I have for you is, like, if someone was to go onto your website right now, tell me, what can they find in your website?
So depending on where you're at, I recommend starting on the Start Here page, because I have very select articles to help you at whatever stage you're in. So for instance, if you're really focused on developing your career, or you want to learn some great negotiation tactics to negotiate a better salary, whatever that might be, there are specific sections in my website that will take you to that article that walks you through step by step how to do that. Another really great place to start is with my free ebook. It's called 7 Ways to Fire Your Career. It's this really handy guidebook that can really give you 7 simple steps to start building life on your terms and get your finances and your career on track in such a way so that you have that freedom of flexibility to make those choices. But if you're a little bit further along in your journey, you've already done a great job of investing, or you're building up your career, there are very focused articles to help you wherever you're at. So I encourage you to start here on the Start Here page if you're a little further along.
If people want to get in touch with you, I'm sure they can do it through your website. There's perhaps a contact page in social media.
There is, yes. The website is the best way to get in touch with me. I am also on most all of the social media channels, and those links are also on my website. So feel free to reach out and get in touch, whether you favor Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever. All of those links are on my website. And I love chatting with people about these topics. I love helping people wherever they're at. I also have a routine newsletter that I send out that are very focused topics, but I love having dialogues with people and having conversations about where you're at, because we're all in this journey. We're at different stages at different points in our lives, and there's no shame in that wherever you're starting. And it's fine as long as you move forward. And I'm always happy to help people wherever they're at.
Absolutely. I will go to your page and check it out myself, because I recently made a few good decisions when it comes to, that's a goal that I have, as a nurse practitioner, as a doctors, you name it, professionals all over me. We have student loans. I never thought I had to. And this is after having my husband being in the military and having, let's say, GI Bill. I was like, I didn't want to take a student loan, but things happen. COVID hit and so on, and all these things that happen. I like what you say, that everybody has their own journey. See, I am very convinced in life, in most every other aspect, is that not one size fits all, because we all have different circumstances, right? We live in a world today where our families don't even look, don't look the same. We have families of the extended families, for example, where sons or daughters have come back to live with their parents. What does that mean as far as financial circumstances, for sure? But Angela, is there anything I have not asked you that you're like, okay, I really need to get that out there. I want people to, there's a message I want to bring here, clarity, something I've not asked you?
Yeah. So something that I will say is that I truly believe the world would be a much better place and people would be much happier if they could live life on their terms. Even if you're not sure that retiring early is right for you, achieving even some level of financial freedom is incredibly empowering. And just think about what those possibilities are. Just what I've been able to do in my own life with having choices about switching my career or taking a bit of a break or exploring this passion project. It's really given me so much freedom. And this is from where I started is a very different story, because where I started is I could barely even find a job. I could barely find a job that was allowing me to make ends meet. So we all have to start from somewhere, and where you're starting from may not be where you want to be today. And that's okay. It's okay. You might feel some level of shame about that. I know I certainly did, but you don't need to feel that way. In fact, I just encourage you to continue seeking out resources and tools that help you. And to your point, Rosabel, we all have different circumstances. We have different journeys. Certain tools are going to be more helpful for one person than they are for another. For instance, I'm very passionate about vision boards, but vision boards may not be the right thing for you. It could be something else.
Right, absolutely. And just when you were talking about that, kept thinking about, I wanted to mention a coworker of mine that, could I say ex-coworker? I got some good news from him, which I'm very happy he's probably listening. And he said, guess what? I'm finally going to work closer to home. He had a long commute, and I knew how for years, kind of like suffering in silence, going through things that, and he finally made that commitment to like, okay, he asked the company to move. That's a big, step. Some people, depending on where they are in their life, whether, especially for men, because they feel like they are the providers, probably even harder for us women. It's a little bit different, because sometimes if we have the husband who kind of takes care of the main things of the house, and then they're like, well, if you want to take the step back, we can make it work and you can be the home stay mom or whatever. But it's a lot more difficult for men, especially because there's that idea that they're the main providers or whatever it is that it looks like. So kudos to him because that was an easy decision for him to make. And I was just thinking about that, because I know that will bring a whole lot of freedom and peace, whatever it means, like you said, and not just the money part, but even if it's just changing your job to your office. And so, well, thank you so much, Angela. Thank you so much again for sharing your insights, your wisdom, everything that you have mentioned here. So remind us again the name of your website.
Fire Your Career. So it's spelled just like it sounds, FIRE, Your Career. That's the best place to find me, find my resources, find the free ebook, and all sorts of handy resources and tools. And yeah, that's the best place to connect with me as well.
Wow, awesome. Well, thank you so much again. And listen, everybody, hey, there you have it. Don't forget to go to fireyourcareer.com and for more tools and information on financial changes and so on. Continue to live life unscripted. See you next time. If you enjoyed this episode of Rosabel Unscripted podcast, here's how you can support our show. Visit www.rosabelzofeld.com to learn more about my work, subscribe to my newsletter, and get updates on upcoming episodes. Head over to my YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, and turn on notifications. Your subscription not only motivates me to keep creating, but also helps others discover these conversations. Share this episode with a friend or colleague. I want to invite you, yes, you listening right now, to check out my book, The Courage to Succeed, A True American Dream. It is available now on Amazon and also Barnes & Noble. This is a story of resilience, grit, and what it really means to chase your dreams, even when the odds are stacked against you. If you ever face fear, failure, or uncertainty, this book will meet you right there and remind you that courage always has a voice. Just search The Courage to Succeed, A True American Dream by Rosabel Unscripted on Amazon, or head to the link in the show notes, because your dream is worth it and your courage can take you there.